Sometimes, the people we love most can break us in ways we never imagined possible. What happened at my Mother's Day brunch changed everything I thought I knew about family. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about relationships. My name is Catherine, and at 63 years old, I thought I had figured out how to navigate the complexities of being a mother. That morning of Mother's Day started like any other Sunday in my modest two-bedroom house in suburban Cleveland. The spring air carried the scent of blooming lilacs through my kitchen window as I prepared for what I hoped would be a perfect day with my daughter Sarah. I had been planning this brunch for weeks. After my husband Robert passed away 2 years ago, holidays had become different, quieter, lonelier, but I was determined to make the best of them. Sarah, now 34 and a successful marketing executive, had been distant lately. Her job consumed most of her time, and our phone calls had become shorter and less frequent. This Mother's Day felt like an opportunity to reconnect, to bridge whatever gap had formed between us. I set the dining room table with my finest china, the delicate porcelain set that had belonged to my mother, passed down through 3 generations of women in our family. Each plate told a story, hand-painted with tiny blue flowers that seemed to dance around the edges. This was the same china we had used for every special occasion throughout Sarah's childhood. Birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. It represented continuity, tradition, love. The menu I had planned was ambitious for someone my age cooking alone. Eggs Benedict with homemade hollandaise sauce, fresh fruit salad with strawberries and blueberries, crispy bacon, and Sarah's favorite cinnamon rolls that I had started preparing the night before. The kitchen filled with warm, comforting aromas that reminded me of countless Sunday mornings when Sarah was young, when she would stumble downstairs in her pajamas and help me crack eggs or stir batter. As I moved around the kitchen, my arthritic hands working carefully with each ingredient, I found myself humming old songs that Sarah and I used to sing together. Those were simpler times, when a scraped knee could be fixed with a Band-Aid and a kiss, when her biggest worry was whether she would get to stay up late on Friday nights. Now at my age, I understood that relationships become more complicated as children grow into adults with their own lives, their own struggles, their own perspectives on the world. The doorbell rang at exactly 11 o'clock, just as we had arranged. I smoothed my lavender dress, the one Sarah had complimented years ago, and walked to the front door with anticipation building in my chest. When I opened it, Sarah stood there looking polished and professional even on a Sunday, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, wearing a cream-colored blouse and navy slacks that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," she said, leaning in for a brief hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. Her embrace was stiff, distant, and I noticed she was already checking her phone before she had fully stepped inside. "Sarah, honey, you look beautiful," I said, trying to inject warmth into my voice despite the cool reception. "I'm so glad you could make it. I've prepared all your favorites." She followed me into the dining room, and I watched her take in the carefully set table, the fresh flowers I had arranged in the center, the cloth napkins folded just so. For a moment, I thought I saw something soften in her expression, but it passed quickly. "Mom, this looks elaborate," she said, and there was something in her tone that I couldn't quite place. Not appreciation, not criticism exactly, but something that made my stomach tighten with unease. "I wanted today to be special," I replied, pulling out her chair, the same chair she had sat in as a child, teenager, young adult. "It's been too long since we've had a proper meal together." As I served the food, I tried to engage her in conversation. I asked about her work, her apartment, her friends, but her responses were brief and distracted. She kept glancing at her phone, and I could sense her impatience growing with each passing minute. The excitement I had felt all morning began to transform into anxiety. "Sarah, is everything all right?" I finally asked, setting down my fork. "You seem somewhere else." She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before, a hardness that chilled me to the bone. "Actually, Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about," she said, her voice taking on a tone I recognized from her professional life, the voice she probably used in boardroom meetings. "I've been thinking a lot lately about our relationship, about the past, and I think it's time we addressed some things." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Sarah's words hung in the air between us. I set down my coffee cup with trembling hands, the delicate china making a soft clink against the saucer that sounded unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "What do you mean, dear?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. There was something in her posture, the way she sat rigidly in her chair, that reminded me of the lawyer she had dated years ago. Cold, calculating, preparing for battle. Sarah took a deep breath and placed both hands flat on the table, as if bracing herself. "I've been in therapy, Mom, for the past 6 months, and I've come to realize how much damage you did to me growing up." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing become shallow. "Damage? Sarah, I don't understand. I did everything I could to give you a good life, to love you, to support you." "That's just it," she said, her voice growing stronger, more confident. "Your version of love was suffocating. Do you remember when I was 7 and wanted to quit piano lessons? You made me continue for 6 more years because you said I had natural talent, and it would be a waste. You never asked what I wanted." I remembered those piano lessons. Sarah had shown such promise, such beautiful musical ability. I had sacrificed to pay for those lessons, driving her across town twice a week, sitting in uncomfortable chairs listening to scales and arpeggios because I believed in nurturing her gifts. I was trying to help you develop your talents. I didn't want you to give up on something you might regret later. "But it wasn't your choice to make," Sarah shot back. "And that's just one example. Remember my senior year when I wanted to go to art school in California? You cried for days and told me I was throwing my life away. You guilt-tripped me into staying local and majoring in business instead." The memory came flooding back, painful and complex. I had been terrified of my 18-year-old daughter moving 3,000 miles away, disappearing into a world I didn't understand. The art school was expensive, impractical, and I had genuinely worried about her financial future. I was concerned about your stability, your future security. Art is a difficult field, and I wanted you to have options. "You wanted me to have the life you thought I should have," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. "You never trusted me to make my own decisions. Even now, you still treat me like a child. Look at this whole setup today. The fancy china, the elaborate meal, the flowers. It's all about your idea of what Mother's Day should be, not what I might want or need." I felt tears beginning to form in my eyes. I thought you would enjoy it. I thought it would be nice to have a special day together. But you never asked me what would make me happy. You just assumed, just like you always have. Sarah's composure was cracking now, emotion bleeding through her professional facade. "My therapist helped me see that you were controlling, that you used guilt and manipulation to get your way. The crying, the silent treatments when I disappointed you, the way you made me feel responsible for your happiness. Each accusation felt like a dagger to my heart. I thought back through the years, trying to see my actions through her eyes, and I felt a terrible uncertainty creeping in. Had I been controlling? Had my love somehow twisted into something harmful? Sarah, I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did was because I love you. Maybe I made mistakes, but I was doing my best with what I knew at the time." "That's what makes it worse," she said, and now tears were flowing down her cheeks. "I know you thought you were doing the right thing, but impact matters more than intention, Mom. And the impact was that I grew up feeling like I could never be good enough, like my own thoughts and feelings didn't matter." I reached across the table toward her, but she pulled her hand away. The rejection stung more than any words could have. I've spent years in relationships where I let people walk all over me because I learned early that keeping peace was more important than standing up for myself. I've struggled with anxiety and depression because I never learned to trust my own instincts. All because I was raised to believe that your feelings, your needs, your vision for my life was more important than my own. The dining room that had felt so warm and welcoming an hour ago now felt suffocating. The carefully prepared food sat cooling on our plates, forgotten. The flowers I had arranged seemed to mock me with their cheerful brightness. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked quietly. "Do you want me to apologize? Do you want me to change? I'm 63 years old. I can't undo the past." She wiped her eyes with her napkin, leaving a streak of mascara on the white fabric. I want you to acknowledge what happened. I want you to take responsibility instead of making excuses or turning yourself into the victim." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my daughter across the table that had once been the center of so many happy family memories, and I felt like I was looking at a stranger. This articulate, angry woman bearing accusations like weapons. Where was the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she was scared, who would bring me dandelions from the yard and call them beautiful flowers? "I have acknowledged it," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I said I made mistakes. I said I'm sorry. What more do you want?" Sarah's eyes flashed with frustration. "You're doing it again. You're not really listening to me. You're just waiting for this to be over so things can go back to normal. But I don't want normal anymore, Mom. I can't pretend that everything is fine between us." I felt something breaking inside me, a dam that had been holding back years of my own pain and disappointment. "And what about my feelings, Sarah? What about everything I sacrificed for you? I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. I gave up my own dreams, my own ambitions, to make sure you had every opportunity. I've been alone for 2 years since your father died, and you can barely manage a phone call once a week. But somehow I'm the villain in this story? See?" Sarah slammed her hand on the table, making the delicate china jump. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The guilt trips, the martyrdom. You can't accept criticism without turning it around and making yourself the victim." The plate in front of her, my mother's plate, my grandmother's plate, rattled from the impact. I watched in horror as a hairline crack appeared along one of the painted blue flowers. "Sarah, please be careful with the china," I said, reaching toward the plate. "It's very old, very fragile. Just like everything else in this house," she said bitterly. "Everything is so precious, so delicate, so important to preserve. But what about preserving relationships? What about taking care of living people instead of dead memories?" She stood up abruptly, and in her haste, her elbow knocked against the plate. It slid across the table and crashed to the floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. The sound was sharp and final, like a gunshot in the quiet room. I gasped and immediately dropped to my knees, trying to gather the fragments. "Oh no," I whispered, my hands shaking as I picked up pieces that had been whole for over 70 years. This was my mother's. It's irreplaceable. "It's just a plate, Mom," Sarah said, standing over me as I knelt on the floor among the ruins. "It's just stuff. This is exactly what I mean. You care more about objects than people." I looked up at her from the floor, tears streaming down my face, holding pieces of my family's history in my trembling hands. "How can you say that? How can you be so cruel?" "I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest. And maybe if you had shown me the same consideration you show these plates, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Something snapped inside me then. All the hurt, all the confusion, all the love that felt rejected and thrown back in my face crystallized into a moment of pure reaction. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" I stood up slowly, still clutching the broken pieces. "Get out of my house. If I'm such a terrible mother, if being here is so painful for you, then leave." Sarah's eyes widened. For the first time since she had arrived, she looked uncertain. "Mom, I didn't mean—" "No, you meant every word. You came here today not to celebrate Mother's Day, but to tear apart everything I thought I knew about our relationship. You broke my mother's plate and dismissed it as just stuff. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I can't fix the past, and apparently I can't fix us either. So maybe it's better if you just go." Sarah stood there for a long moment, and I thought perhaps she might apologize, might try to salvage something from this disaster. Instead, she picked up her purse and walked toward the door. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about this, let me know," she said, without turning around. "But I won't keep pretending everything is fine just to protect your feelings." The front door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam could have. I was alone in my house, surrounded by the remains of a Mother's Day that had turned into a nightmare, holding pieces of broken china that would never be whole again. I gathered up my plate, the one that had survived when Sarah's shattered, and walked out to my small back porch. The spring air felt cool against my tear-stained cheeks. I sat down on the old wooden chair that Robert had built years ago and placed my plate on the small table beside me. Then I began to eat my cold eggs, Benedict alone, surrounded by the sound of birds singing and neighbors going about their Sunday afternoon routines. The afternoon stretched endlessly before me as I sat on that back porch, mechanically eating food that had lost all its flavor. The spring breeze carried the sounds of other families enjoying their Sunday. Children laughing in nearby yards, the distant sound of a barbecue grill being fired up, the low murmur of conversation from the house next door, where I knew 3 generations were probably gathered around their own table. I thought about what Sarah had said, really thought about it without the defensive anger that had consumed me during our confrontation. As painful as her words had been, I found myself wondering if there was truth in them that I had been too proud or too frightened to see. Had I been controlling? I remembered the piano lessons, how Sarah's shoulders would slump every Tuesday and Thursday when I reminded her it was time to practice. I had convinced myself that her reluctance was normal, that all children needed to be pushed to develop discipline. But maybe she had genuinely hated it, and I had been too invested in my vision of her success to notice her unhappiness. The art school decision haunted me as I sat there. I could still see 18-year-old Sarah's face when she showed me the acceptance letter, so bright with excitement and possibility. And I remembered my own reaction, the immediate fear, the practical concerns about money and job prospects, the tears I had cried about losing her to a world I didn't understand. Had those tears been manipulation as she claimed? Or had they been genuine terror at the thought of my child disappearing into an uncertain future? Maybe it was both. Maybe my genuine fears had become tools of control without my realizing it. A cardinal landed on the railing near my chair, its bright red feathers vivid against the gray wood. Robert had always said cardinals were visitors from heaven, a belief I had dismissed as foolish sentiment. But sitting there alone with my thoughts, I found myself wondering what he would say about today's disaster. Robert had always been the buffer between Sarah and me, the one who could calm us both down when emotions ran high. He had a way of seeing multiple sides of a situation, of finding compromise where I saw only conflict. "Kathy," he used to say when Sarah and I would clash during her teenage years, "sometimes love means stepping back and letting people find their own way, even when it scares you." I had thought I understood what he meant then, but maybe I hadn't really internalized the lesson. Even after Sarah became an adult, even after she built her own successful career and life, I had continued to offer unsolicited advice, to orchestrate family gatherings according to my preferences, to assume that my way of showing love was the way she needed to receive it. The truth was, I had been lonely since Robert died. The house felt too quiet, too empty, and Sarah's increasingly rare visits had become precious to me in a way that probably put unfair pressure on both of us. I realize now that today's elaborate brunch hadn't really been about making Sarah happy. It had been about making myself feel needed, important, like the mother I used to be when she was small and dependent on me. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, I heard a car door slam in my driveway. My heart jumped, hoping against hope that Sarah had returned, ready to try again. But when I walked around to the front of the house, I saw my neighbor Helen approaching with a concerned expression. "Catherine, dear, I saw Sarah leave earlier and you looked upset. Is everything all right?" Helen was 71, a widow like myself, and we had developed a friendship built on shared morning walks and evening conversations over the fence that separated our yards. She was one of the few people I could be honest with about the challenges of maintaining relationships with adult children who lived busy, independent lives. "We had a fight," I said simply. "She thinks I was a controlling mother, and maybe she's right." Helen sat down in the chair next to mine, her expression thoughtful. "You know, my daughter Laura told me something similar a few years ago. It nearly destroyed me at first. I was so hurt, so defensive. But eventually, I realized that her perspective mattered, even if it didn't match my intentions." "How did you get past it?" "I had to learn to apologize without defending myself," Helen said. "That was the hardest part. I wanted to explain why I did what I did, to make her understand that everything came from love. But she needed me to just acknowledge her experience without making it about my feelings." We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the shadows lengthen across my lawn. I thought about the broken plate still scattered across my dining room floor, about the hurt in Sarah's eyes, about the loneliness that had driven me to create today's perfect scenario without considering what Sarah might actually want or need. "I need to call her," I said finally. "What will you say?" "I don't know yet, but I think I need to start by listening instead of talking." That evening, I spent an hour carefully sweeping up every fragment of my mother's broken plate. I couldn't save it, couldn't put it back together, but I could honor what it had been by handling its remains with care. As I worked, I thought about the fact that some breakages are irreparable, but that doesn't mean the pieces are worthless. They carry the memory of what was whole, and sometimes that's enough. I picked up my phone 3 times before finally finding the courage to dial Sarah's number. It went to voicemail, and I was almost relieved. Speaking to a recording felt easier than facing her immediate reaction. "Sarah, it's Mom. I've been thinking about everything you said today, and I want you to know that I heard you. I may not have shown it in the moment, but I was listening. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. Not sorry that you're upset, but sorry for the ways I failed you as a mother. I would like to try again if you're willing, but this time I want to hear what you need from me instead of assuming I know what's best. I love you, and I'm proud of the strong, honest woman you've become, even when that honesty is hard for me to hear." I hung up and sat back in my chair, feeling both drained and oddly peaceful. The work of rebuilding our relationship wouldn't be easy, and it might not even be possible. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was approaching it from a place of genuine humility rather than wounded pride. The broken plate was gone, swept away and discarded. But maybe, just maybe, Sarah and I could find a way to build something new from the pieces of what we had been. Something less fragile, more honest, and ultimately stronger than the delicate perfection I had been trying so hard to preserve.